everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Life Work Balance podcast. I am Leah Starkey, and here with me is our co-host, Paul Conley. And I'm excited that we have a returning guest today on a topic that I currently could use a little talking to about. So I'm excited to learn all the things. Paul, what are we talking about today?
Well, it's right after Halloween, so I'm going to just refer to you as Superwoman for the remainder of this, for anybody that saw Leah's awesome Superwoman costume and all the fun things from their Halloween party. I'm only going to call you Superwoman. But today we're joined by Pamela Horton, and we are talking about the imposter syndrome. Pamela, if you could, for those who don't know what it is, I'm sure maybe they do, but they don't know it has a name. Start by just telling us, what is the imposter syndrome?
Well, first, hello, and thank you for having me. And as a returning guest, I absolutely enjoy this time with you guys. The imposter syndrome, plainly put, is something that people have or experience when they think that they receive their accomplishments or they experience their accomplishments as a result of luck versus their accomplishments and the hard work that they've actually put into it, into whatever it is that they're working towards. So in other words, if you're a highly accomplished individual and you think that you reached your goal and where you are because of luck and not because of the hard work, you might be suffering from imposter syndrome. And about 70% of people actually experience imposter syndrome, where they just don't believe anything nice or positive that's being said about their work. They think that they could do better or more. And there's various types of imposter syndrome, different types of people that have experienced imposter syndrome, but it's about 70% of us that do.
Would it be a different term if you are feeling, and this isn't even really, maybe it has something to do with what I'm going through right now, but this is just in general other things that I've experienced in the past where I know enough about the topic that I am engaged in or my job or whatever it happens to be, but I know that there are a lot of people that are much more experienced than myself and know a whole lot more. So I don't always feel like I'm best suited to be the person to whether talk about it or be the specialist about that. Would that be a different term or would that just be a different level of it?
A different level is a good way of putting that, because one of the things I like to share with my clients is we teach what we need to know. So if you're becoming an expert or somebody who knows something about a specific subject matter and you're learning about it, and of course there's going to be more people that have had more experience at it, that have had plenty of years, whether they're practicing it, they might have a little bit more experience, but you're still learning it. You could speak to it, and the best way to learn something is actually teaching it and being able to speak to it. Mm-hmm. So I would call that more at a different level.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Our mind responds to two things and two things only. And this is a science thing. This is one thing that I've learned over the years. Whatever it is that we place in our mind by words or thoughts, and even the images that we allow in our head or place in our heads, those are the things that our minds respond to. So if you are naturally telling yourself, I don't know enough about this, or there's somebody else that knows more, or they could be doing it better, or they could do a better job, or whatever it is that the dialogue that's coming out of our mouths is, that is what our mind is going to respond to, and we're going to feel accordingly to what it is that we're placing in our mind. So you feel less than if you're thinking those things.
You mentioned 70% of people go through this. What are some of the most common things that people are working through or they feel like they're imposters at?
I just had this conversation with two people today during my sessions. One of them manages a $222 million budget, and the other one manages a $90 billion budget. And both of them don't feel like they are experts. They were having a low moment. They were putting themselves through the gauntlet and just saying what you were experiencing earlier, Leah, and that other people know better about this. I can't believe I'm responsible for this type of work. They're going to find me out. I'm not doing enough. I'm not working enough hours. Whatever that dialogue is, that's not even the real them. Where are these sentences and these statements coming from? And we can talk about that later, how we can counter imposter syndrome. But it's really anybody that is a high achiever. It could be anybody who just works super hard. It could be someone who, for example, the $222 million budget. She's finance, she's managing, going about her day, and she works right now, is looking for life-work balance. I probably should put her onto your podcast. She's working 12 hours a day. She's really just in the thick of things. And the more that she works at it, the less qualified she feels, like she's not worthy of the position. And so she berates herself. She's just bullying herself. And where do these comments come from? So one of the things I'm having her do is asking herself, how do I know this statement to be true? Is this sentence helping me or hindering me? And those are some of the things that anybody can do to ask themselves to unhook from the train of thought that's going on, that's making them feel like less than, an imposter, a fraud. Another way, some people feel like they're a fraud because they feel like they're not producing enough. It's really quite interesting. It can apply to anybody who isn't able to internalize their successes. And there are so many wins that any one person has throughout the day. A win is a win is a win, no matter how small or how large the size is. And when we are able to keep track of those wins, we can keep that imposter or that fraud feeling at bay.
Does imposter syndrome ever come from somebody else berating them, or even a different area of their life? Say a significant other tells them they're not good enough, even though in their career they're really good, and that just carries over. Can the psychology of that work that way?
100%. We are where we steep ourselves. So if we're steeping in a hot tea of bullying behavior or not so great things being said to us, we do absorb that, and that will carry over into other areas of our lives. But generally, an imposter syndrome, it can start in an environment. It can start at home when you're a child, and your grades need to be good enough. You have to be the best at the sports. You've got to work at whatever it is that your talent is or that you're working through. And if they are not good enough, whatever the dialogue or whatever the conversations are that are being had at home from our parents, they do carry with us, meaning we have to work even harder in order to be accepted, in order to win that trophy, in order to earn that A. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what sticks with us is the feelings and the energy of being told that we're not good enough or that you could have done better, which could be true in many cases, but these things do stick with us and carry over into other areas. Yeah.
Interesting. There's
different types of people who experience imposter syndrome, and there's patterns that are floating around them. So you have individuals and professionals who are the perfectionists. You have the experts, you have people who are natural geniuses, you have individuals who are like the soloist, or to your point, Paul, when you, in your costume, Superwoman, there are people who feel like they need to be Superman and Superwoman in every area that they're doing. It's just that they're hardwired that way for whatever reason. The perfectionists, they have extremely high, sometimes not logical expectations for themselves. It's not feasible expectations for themselves. You have your experts who feel like they need to know every ounce of information. And if one little piece is off, that just throws off the whole project. You have your natural geniuses who, when they have to work hard and struggle at learning something, when they are a natural genius, everything usually comes really easily to them. Well, then they might go into a tizzy and just go a downward spiral. There you have your people who are the soloists, who think that they could do everything on their own. They don't ever need to ask for any help. And all of these things is really keeping everyone at arm's bay so that they don't find out the fear, the illogical fear that they're having, that they are a fraud or that they are an imposter. And so these are all things that start from somewhere, whether it's an anxiety, whether it's depression, or actually our environment within the home.
Interesting. I'm curious because you've got the people who are the opposite, who are extremely cocky, and then you've got the people who are feeling less than adequate. Is there a happy medium there? Because nobody likes the cocky guy. We all know that guy. Nobody likes him. But if you're not feeling adequate enough, you're bringing yourself down, and eventually it's going to show one way or another. Is there a happy medium? Is there a way we could create that happy medium without becoming overly cocky?
Yes. Understand that people who exhibit more than their fair share of confidence, who are cocky, that cockiness most likely is actually coming from insecurity. Mm-hmm. They are overcompensating for something. They're hiding something. They are wanting to project an entirely different point of view than what their reality is. And then you have your high achievers, your go-getters who And it is the complete opposite. It is funny. It's just so opposite and ironic that the people who are achieving, who do work hard, who do learn, they're the ones who don't feel like they got it all together. So the happy medium is, going back to what I said regarding your mind, my mind, all of our minds respond to two things and two things only. And that is the words that we think and speak and the images that we allow and place in our head. So if you are consuming information, like if you have a partner that's telling you not great things about you, you're going to absorb that and it's going to carry over into the other area. The balance comes from you monitoring and you mastering your own thoughts and remembering just how good you are. And you do that in a loving way, in a way that's humble, in a way that it takes practice, because it's about progress and not perfection. And so when you're able to remind yourself in a loving, gentle way and actually detach from your thoughts. So my clients get to a point where they're able to observe themselves in real time to actually correct a behavior that they're working towards. When you're able to do that in real time, it's that time in real live correcting mode where you're able to ask the question, how do I know this to be true? Let's really take a good look at this. Have I ever failed at anything? If so, what was that? Have I always accomplished all of my projects? Have I gotten everything done? When I do finish things, what is the feedback from everybody? Generally, it's always positive. So when you build a pause between what you're thinking and your response to it, when you build a pause between what you're feeling and your response to it, you're able to logically answer your own questions of what you're asking and see the reality of the situation, which is you're awesome at what you do. You are a finisher. You may be competitive, which is only going to give you that competitive edge, and you're going to accomplish everything that you need to accomplish, and you're going to keep your job in the meantime, and all of those things that people are fearful of.
I think it's interesting when I talk through some of these things. A lot of times sometimes we give ourselves too much credit, and sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit. An example is when we're talking through something that if somebody is coming to you asking for your help with something, or they want your advice on something, by definition, you have an opinion or some knowledge that's maybe greater than they have, or they wouldn't seek your opinion out, or you wouldn't have it. So you might not be there can only be one person that knows the most. I don't know who that is, but there's somebody on a certain topic that knows the most. So everybody else, you're working with groups that are individuals or whatever. I always use the example of when I would try to convince somebody to coach youth soccer, and they would be like, well, I don't know anything about soccer. And I'm like, listen, I don't need you to know anything about soccer. I need you to know more than the 3-year-old about soccer. And they're like, well, I know more than a 3-year-old about soccer. I'm like, well, great. That's the person you're working with. So as long as you know more than them, what's the problem here? Now, if I said, hey, let's go coach a professional team, we have a problem. There's need to be somebody with a little bit more of a talent, but sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit of who our audience is.
Right. We don't give ourselves enough credit for knowing what we know, right? It's easy to remember the negative things or the bad things or the things that we failed at. And I don't even like to use the word failure because everything is an experience. But to your point, Paul, even if someone isn't asking for advice from you and there's a particular topic or something that you've been practicing for years and you do know more about that topic than the individual, and to be able to offer that up, a lot of people choose not to because they offer advice that can actually help somebody, and the best way to lift ourselves is to lift somebody else. So they actually hold that information back because they don't feel like they are worthy of or have that information to share and give that person advice or whatever. So we do ourselves a lot of disservice when we don't give ourselves credit, especially in the subject matters and the areas of practice, hours of practice that we've had over the years for whatever the topic matter is. It's an interesting conundrum. The imposter syndrome, not having enough confidence, keeping our mouths quiet when we really know that we could offer up and help somebody lift themselves. There's not enough of that going around. And then you go into the workplace and you have people who are stars, who take on more workload than their colleagues, who get everything accomplished, and they go home feeling they're not feeling great about themselves, even though they've just done a stellar job, way better than 10 other people in their department. It's a conundrum.
like you said in the beginning, Paul, I think a lot of people know what imposter syndrome is. And maybe there's a lot that also do not know yet that it had a name, but they felt it before. I've heard about it over and over again. I've heard multiple people talk on it. I've read about it. I know it's a thing. I know there's psychology behind it. So I'm not lacking knowledge in it. However, here I am going through this situation again. Like, this isn't the first time I've ever gone through this either. So why is it that even though we know it's really kind of our mind just playing tricks on ourselves, why do we allow the negative self-talk keep reoccurring and we keep allowing ourselves to get back into this situation? And it can be crippling sometimes, especially when you're at a do or die spot to push past a tough spot in your business or whatever, and you just have to keep pushing past, and what's going on, but for some reason I just keep letting it happen.
We're conditioned out of self-awareness. Everything right now, and I'm generalizing when I say the word everything, but if you are someone who is consuming typical television, and I'm not saying that you are,
Right.
but if someone is ingesting typical television shows, typical commercials, typical top 40 music, typical, we are being conditioned right out of self-awareness. And self-awareness is everyone keeps looking for a magic pill. Self-awareness and gratitude are two magic pills that work like magic. And we are being conditioned out of self-awareness with being told that we're not good enough, evidence of all of the makeup and all of the hair products and everything that's out there to do better, be better, should look better, etc. We are being conditioned right out of self-awareness with all of the distractions from noise, typical noise, to gaming, to just the busyness disease to keep us, again, away from being self-aware. And the more we are conditioned out of self-awareness, the more we practice negativity. We believe what it is that we are being told. We act on our beliefs. And therefore, it is nothing more than one big habit. Imposter syndrome is a habit. Any type of syndrome is a habit that can be reversed by the way that we think. And the way that we think really drives everything. So it can be very frustrating when we keep recurring the same pattern. But if we just ask ourselves, wait a minute, what is it that I'm supposed to be learning right now by having this ongoing experience, the same thing over and over and over again, no matter how often it occurs or how little occurs, it is still a pattern. We just ask, what is it that I'm meant to learn here? Sit with yourself instead of being distracted, and you'll hear the answers. You will get the answers. They'll be like a lightning bolt. You will just feel them. You'll know them. It'll come to you. You might hear it, someone else say it, but you will know that that message is meant for you. And until you throw a monkey wrench into that pattern, again, going back, this must be the message for today. So therefore, I'm going to repeat it. When we are conditioned to be self-aware, we can pay more attention to what it is that we are allowing in our head and what it is that we are thinking at any given time. So the episodes or the hiccups, no matter what that is, in this case, imposter syndrome, falling back into that pattern, they will happen farther and fewer in between. I myself still experience imposter syndrome if I'm about to publicly speak on a topic, or there are things that still hit me that I've had to overcome, but it's a good thing because it's more practice. And Paul's heard me say this multiple times. Practice is key, and consistency is the king of change. So the more practice you get feeling like an imposter syndrome, almost celebrate that, because you can be like, all right, now I have another opportunity to overcome this and practice it and make progress versus being perfect at it.
You mentioned things that we can do to counteract, play offense against this thing, and make sure that we don't feel like imposters at what we're doing, because whatever it is that we're doing, it's probably significantly better than we give ourselves credit in a lot of cases. We can do a lot more, and we have an opportunity. We know this exists. So we know, you mentioned there's some tips to talk through about counteracting it. And specifically, I think what our audience is trying to put life ahead of work. And I think that a lot of times when you're doing that, the imposter syndrome comes into whatever we're doing. So it's that promotion. It's that, should I charge more for my product? Oh, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy to charge what that person is because they're better than me, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked through the self-talk, but how do we counter so that we're offense instead of defense on this thing?
What I'm about to share with you actually works for really many syndromes. It's the process of slowing yourself down. So for those of you who are looking and seeking more life-work balance, the more you place more attention, time, devotion that you place and give to yourself, everything else is going to fall into place. The more you take care of your health, the more that you take care of your mindfulness, the more that you do right by you, your mind, body, and soul, everything else will fall into place. It's been proven too many times for me to share anything differently. To counter and to play, I'm not a sports person, offense. Thank you. To play offense with regards to the imposter syndrome, it's really about slowing down and becoming fully aware of what it is that you are thinking. So when you become aware, as soon as you become aware, I'm inviting you to be aware of exactly what you're thinking during this time, this moment of weakness, if you will, this hiccup. And when you stop yourself and become aware of what it is that you're thinking, you can then build that pause, as I mentioned earlier, before you respond to it. So right now, there's the real you, and then there's the ego you. There's the real me, and then there's my ego self. It's the ego that is attacking us that we need to play offense to. So when our ego starts to attack us with specific comments about you're not good enough, you're not working enough hours, and about, even though you're working beyond 50 hours or 60 hours a week, that ego will tell you that you're not working enough. You need to work more hours. Is that really rational? Does that make sense to you? Is that a logical thing to say and hear yourself say when you really are working as many hours as you possibly can? And no, it's not logical. It is not fair to say to yourself, the truth is you're working more than enough hours and you may not even need to, but because again, we're conditioned out of self-awareness, we're conditioned into the busyness disease, we're conditioned to work more, do those emails over the weekend, send them late at night. It's just silly when you think about it because it's against being well. So when you become aware of your thoughts, you build a pause between your response to those thoughts, meaning don't allow yourself to spiral downward. Don't attach yourself to the thought. Just be observant of it. Don't respond to it. Just observe and become aware of that. And once you become aware of it, I'm inviting you not to engage with it. Don't, again, repeat it. Just pull that pause in. Once you do that, then you ask the questions. How do I know this to be true? Is this true? Is this hurting me or helping me? Because if you had your father, your sister, your spouse, your niece, your nephew, your best friend, you would not say these things to them and they would not say these things to you. And therefore, why would you want to hear or have your ego say that to you? It's not a logical thing. It is a hurtful thing. It is hurting you. You don't want to be hurt. So the invitation is to stop hurting yourself just by putting that pause in. Another way that you can help yourself is it's great to remember what you have accomplished, what you have done, what good things were said to you that day, what affirmations or validations did you receive in any given day. So one of the things that I offer up for my clients is to keep a running tab, whether that is a text message that you are voice texting yourself, like a running tab or conversation, whether you're emailing, whether you're writing in a journal every single night, just spend 2 to 3 minutes writing down what it was that you did really well, what it was that you accomplished during the day, what compliments did you receive? Because most likely high achievers, high performers receive a lot of compliments, especially when they're working in teams. But if you're working solo, if you're working by yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't usually get that feedback. So when you write down your experiences that you have with your clients or what has gone on the day that you actually accomplished, that you feel really good about, this becomes your memory. So you don't have to tax your memory in the moment of weakness. You go to your book and you start reading the amazing things that you've accomplished and do for yourself and for others, for work, for life, etc. And these things are reaffirming and you become what you think. So if you engage and attach those thoughts to those negative thoughts from the imposter syndrome, you're going to become more of that and you're going to have to dig yourself out of a hole. When you build that pause, you become aware, and then you remind yourself of all of the amazing things that you're doing. You are focusing on that, and you become more of what it is that you've been accomplishing, achieving, and feeling.
It's a great idea, writing it down before bed. I like that, so that you've got it right there for you to go back to.
That's right. It's just a constant memory. And in the beginning, when you're really in the thick of it, because listen, the imposter syndrome, you can get really beat up over it and it can last for a while. It's the best time to pull that out and say, no, I reject these feelings. Tell yourself you reject these thoughts, you reject these feelings, and then go back and find the truth of what the situation is.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
I do a journal every day, and for a period of time, I was just writing down kind of what happened during the day. Just it's useful, but now I've kind of changed it to what did I feel good about the day? What did I accomplish? Even on days where, and I'm sure this is for everybody, on days you don't think you did anything, you probably did a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I notice it when I'm going through. There's rarely a day where I'm like, I'll sit there and I'll be like, okay, I did the one thing. And then they're like, oh, wait, I did that and I did that. And then things that sometimes I think and I think it becomes a challenge too, because you set yourself up for the expectations because you've done it so many times. Like as a runner, I am like, well, I run 4 miles all the time. That's not impressive. Like Leah ran 12. Like that's better. But then I'm like, well, then I have to sometimes think and go, well, I bet 99% of the world did not run 4 miles today.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, am I Leah? No, but who is? But it's more about, okay, great. Or what else I like to do is say, well, where was I a year ago?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way. Sometimes I have to give myself that kind of that pep talk to get over it. And then sometimes a lot of times we are the ones that we are by definition, we know more about what we don't know than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Like I'm the only person in the world that knows what I don't know. Mm-hmm. So let the others, it's not really any of their business.
Yeah.
That's right. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Comparison is the thief of joy. The client that I mentioned who is working 12 hours a day, she could do her job in probably 3 or 4 hours. She can complete everything in probably 3 or 4 hours a day. She's that good. And what she does is she continues working the rest of the 10 or however many hours afterwards, just by moving, like she's getting things accomplished, but it's not as effective as when she is fully alive, fully powered up, so to speak, and fully charged. Her battery is fully charged. She's actually draining her battery, and she probably was lessening her output. And now we're getting on a trajectory where she's going to be working less hours, and we're going to be working on her confidence and lessening that imposter syndrome so that her battery will be fully charged so that she can give attention to all the other areas that might be lacking, like work balance. It's really interesting.
This has, it's just a point that I'll make every podcast. There's an opportunity. We, as a society, reward people and clarify hard work, quote unquote, a podcast air quote, as how many hours did you put into something? And it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You can put in 12 hours at something and not do the right things, not have the ability to do it, not do it correctly, and it not be worth a thing. Sometimes people can spend 30 minutes on something and get an output that matters. That's what true work is about. And I think that there's obviously some service jobs and things like that you have to be there from when it opens to close, whatever. You have to have a human there to do it. But
sure.
if in a lot of professions, in a lot of our jobs, you have to produce for either yourself or the business or whatever. And I think sometimes, I know this sometimes, where I think we should all kind of tell ourselves, okay, did I make a positive impact today on the business? Did I do a good job? Okay, well, I'm done for the day then. I've moved the needle. And maybe it's setting a target. Once you hit that target, if you're better at sales calls than other people, and it takes me 50 calls and it takes Leah 3, well, all right, Leah, see you at the beach. I don't know. Go hang out.
Right. And we're conditioned not to take time for ourselves.
Yeah.
And if the more time we take time for ourselves, it's such a counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. Life is counterintuitive, right? The less time we spend with ourselves, the less time we spend getting to know ourselves, the more trouble we get ourselves into, meaning we get sick, meaning we aren't meeting goals, meaning we aren't happy with our relationships. But the more time that we spend with ourselves, getting to know how we operate, who we are, what's important to us, what do we value, instead of valuing things and doing things because other people, that's how they've done it, or that's how other people in their families have done it. So they're just on this treadmill, if you will. Instead of doing it that way, you spend more time with yourself, being in silence, having, your morning routines are very important. All of this helps you gain even more confidence, helps you work less, work smarter, not harder, allows for opportunities to come to you that fit your genius zone, that fit your strengths, versus you having to work against your weaknesses. It's very, very counterintuitive. So I'll say that's another way that you can counteract, go on offense for the imposter syndrome, and that is to spend more time getting to know yourself without any distractions, and whatever that means and however to do that. That's a very key, important thing that you can do for yourself.
Well, and I think it's worth mentioning, and I think society, we trick ourselves, and just want to hammer this point home again, that we often say, if you do this, you can work less. A lot of times it's work less hours, because a lot of times the people that are working 50, 60 hours a week aren't really truly working and making an impact for about 30 of those. I've spent a lot of time talking to people that work in those thresholds, those high hours, and they don't necessarily love it, but I'll sit there and I'll say, what do you do? What are you doing? Because if it's sitting there bouncing back emails all day and shuffling this paper to this paper, you're really just kind of compensating for whatever. I know I go off on the little side tangent there, but the Life Work Balance Nation and the Life Work Balance podcast can't miss an opportunity to try to hammer that point home.
That's right.
Yeah. Speaking to your client situation, I feel that to my core, because I'll get in this treadmill and the rat race of I got to work. And there are legit things that need to be done. They don't all need done right now. But being that I own my own company, I feel like everything needs done right now, like yesterday. So I'll just work and I'll keep going through this. And to the point where I'm tired, like I'm emotionally tired. And I feel the more emotionally tired I get, the harder it is for me to be mentally strong and say, you got this. You are more than adequate to do this. Just calm down, chill out, take some time to yourself. And I found that setting time limits for myself during the day, especially being that they are my own businesses and I could do them at any hour during the day, I have to set a time limit for myself. Otherwise, I will continue to work and emotionally just beat myself up to the point where I just don't feel like I'm good enough to do it. And so, I mean, I feel for her, and I really hope that she's able to cut some of her hours and really focus on those solid core couple hours there.
My guess is, I was listening to something the other day about this, and it makes so much sense about how your best thinking, and a lot of people say this, my best thinking comes when I'm laying there at bed or when I'm in the shower. Well, maybe it's the only times throughout the whole day you allow yourself to truly just think and sit and be there with your thoughts. If I am struggling with something work-wise or whatever, personal, whatever problem I have, if I go on a run, which to our society, that would not be viewed as work. That would be viewed as exercise and recreation. That's the opposite of working. I'm actually kind of slacking if I was going for a run midday. But let me tell you, that's when I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's when I'll come up with the idea.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But in society, we've kind of trained ourselves to say, you're working when you're sitting at your desk, or you're working when you're working. You physically, people have to see you working, or you're not working. It's like, well, no, somebody's paying me to better this business. That's what they're paying me to do ultimately.
Yeah, we have like 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, but they're generally the same thoughts. And we can't, and those thoughts are on subconscious, they're on automatic. And because we're being conditioned to be busy, to do exactly what you just said, work at a job, the longer the better. There's little time for ourselves running, hearing what comes in. And when we are tired, we're not likely to be on the offense of those attacking thoughts. When we are dehydrated, and it's something like 87% of the population is dehydrated. So Lee, I don't know how much water you drink, but there's only been one person, and Paul, I can say this to you now. I never had one person that drank enough water until now, because I usually ask my clients, how much water do you drink a day? And I have you guys.
Close.
You were very close. You were very close. And the only reason why you weren't on it is because you exercise more than the majority of people.
There's that competitiveness in me. I was like, no, I was very close. And now I drink more, and I spend about half my day in the bathroom. So,
silence. Hopefully you don't bring your phone with you.
Yeah.
But so if you're hydrated, it sounds trite, but it's so proper and effective if you're properly hydrated. So make sure you're drinking the amount of water according to your weight, and find out at least 3 different resources to find out how much water you should be drinking according to your body weight every single day. That will properly hydrate you. And when you are properly have rest and you're properly exercised and you exercise out those the negative gunk, if you will, or junk, you are more apt to be able to play offense in a more superior way that's going to counteract that imposter syndrome as well. So drink your water and get some rest. Go do it counterintuitively. Live life counterintuitively.
I can attest that Leah is passionate about water and she drinks water. And when she came to visit us recently,
that's weird how much water
she actually had gallons of water with her. And we didn't have dumbbells. And I walked in the house and Leah was doing like supersets with gallon jugs of water and stuff. So let me just tell you, Leah appreciates water.
I love water. I drink a gallon a day. That
Wonderful.
is because I did bodybuilding, and so mine, that's a great new fact that I did not know, which makes sense because our body is like 90% water, so it makes sense that you think clearer. But I do it for the physical fitness aspect of it, but now I have another reason to. So we love water.
That's awesome. I encourage you to check it out. Find out exactly how much you should be drinking for your body, because it might be less because you're very, very physically active. So you might be a little bit dehydrated as a result of not having enough. Right. So I definitely encourage you, and that'll help with the sleeping and everything else. But, you guys, let me just say this one more time. Our minds respond to 2 things. I want to drive this message home. If our minds respond to 2 things, and 2 things only: the words that we think and speak, and the images that we allow and place in our heads. So if you are allowing and speaking things in a way that is degrading, that's bullying yourself, I'm totally inviting you, whether you're in a moment of imposter syndrome or not, at any other time, I'm totally inviting every one of you to pay attention, become aware of what it is that you're thinking at any given moment. You can set an alarm every hour, every couple of hours, just to check in with yourself to develop that habit.
I like that.
And this is to be preventative. This is preventative work. And begin to change the story, because we're saying 70 to 80,000 things to ourselves every single day, and it's the same thing. So like Deepak Chopra says, our cells are eavesdropping on everything and on our thoughts. So whatever it is that you're thinking internally or speaking externally, we speak into existence what we're speaking and thinking. So once you catch yourself, please change the dialogue, change the story, begin to tell yourself a different story so that you have a different trajectory. Otherwise, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, including the imposter syndrome.
That's great.
Let me tell you somebody who's not an imposter. That's the Cleveland cookie guy. The Cleveland cookie guy is the ultimate cookie provider. Now listen, this podcast is going to come out just before Thanksgiving. There's turkey, there's stuffing, there's pies, everything. Do you want to make yourself the ultimate Thanksgiving invitee? You will get invited to Thanksgiving, even if it's your family. Sometimes they don't want you there. They're going to keep inviting you. Keep the holiday spirit going and welcome in some delicious chocolate chip cookies or a s'more cookie or whatever it is that suits your appetite. Cleveland cookie guy, not an imposter.
The best.
Final question. We always try to wrap up with one thing that, and you've probably said it, but one tangible thing that the life work balance nation could take today and put into their daily life today to help them change this narrative, to counteract the imposter syndrome.
Begin to pay attention to your body language, your body posture, and your facial expressions. If you can get yourself into a habit of checking in on those 3 things, you can become aware exactly what it is that you're thinking. And when you ask yourself if you're slunched over, if you're frowning, we just aren't aware. So when you check in on your body language, your body posture, and your facial expressions, and you realize how you're sitting, what you're doing, you ask yourself, what was it that I was just thinking? You will have that answer. And whatever it is, just state the complete opposite. Change the narrative and repeat that, because a belief is something that is repeatedly said over and over and over again. So once you become aware of what it is that you're thinking, that's creating that trajectory and that experience, you change it, and you change it by stating the complete opposite. But first we have to become aware. And you do that by your body language, facial expressions, and your body posture.
And for those of you, we are on Zoom. For those of you who just did what I did, I sat up a little taller. I started smiling a little bit. So I encourage all of you to have done the same thing I did.
That's great.
And
That's
don't go
great.
back. I always think about what my grandma would tell me when I was at the table, and don't slouch at the table. So stand up tall and smile.
That's great advice.
It's very effective when you practice it, just like anything else.
Thank you so much for joining today. It's been a really great conversation.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'm speaking for Leah here that this is a topic where we know it exists, but the counteracting it is so important to how we move forward and how we progress in our confidence in taking ourselves one step closer to life-work balance. Whoever's listening out there, you are good enough. You are better than the person that you think you are at times. You're not an imposter. You are really strong. You really are good. So thank you, Pamela. Thank you for your time today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next week.